So we like to keep things real easy here at Rutherford Hill. If I could call it chilling on the hill.
Love it.
Love it. Just got some wine, relaxing. So there's only 2 rules to the tour. The first rule is this: hold on to your glass. Now I will be pouring wine as we go. Now folks, my whole purpose for getting up in life is to make sure you guys get wine, right?
I love that.
So
That works for me.
It's a very, my middle name is the enabler, so it all just matches up, right? So, if you don't have a glass, I'm still going to figure out a way to get you wine. Now, if I have to go margarita style, I will. And I've been practicing on myself at home, by the way, so I'm getting really good at it. And the second rule is this: just follow the guy with the wine. And that's me. So grab a glass.
Okay.
I told you we keep it simple. We keep it real simple. Come on out, folks. Here we go.
Let's go that way. Oh.
Everybody got a glass?
Yep.
All right, here we go.
Oh, we're going out.
Life is good, huh?
Say, don't start drinking.
All right. Move and shake it. So folks, my name is Joseph. I will be leading you on the tour today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Rutherford Hill. You are starting off our tour with our beautiful 2018 Sauvignon Blanc. Now, I love this wine for 2 reasons. First, its name. Sauvignon Blanc, in French, literally translates to wild, savage, untamed white grape. Right? A wild indigenous grape growing along the ground, very high in acid. And we want to hold on to that beautiful, bright, crisp acidity. Because the second reason I love this wine so much is if you were invited to a dinner in Europe, so dinners in France, dinners in Italy, very relaxing, many hours, many courses. Each course gets paired with a wine. Each course gets a little bit more complex as you go. However, when you arrive, you would either be greeted with some Sauvignon Blanc or a little bit of sparkling wine, because they would say to you, you must cleanse the palate to begin the journey. So we are cleansing the palate to begin the journey of this tour. I like to start my tours up here so we can take a moment and look at this crazy building that's behind you. A building completely unique to Napa Valley, one of its kind. And it was built by a very famous gentleman here in this valley, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Joseph Phelps, of the Joseph Phelps Winery right down the road there. He was hired by the original company that started this winery back in 1972 to build this building for them. So at that time he was a general contractor. He actually didn't start his winery until '76. And at that time, he received this commission. He was working with an architect from San Francisco, and they decided that they were going to go for sort of this Northern California rustic lodge feel to the design of this building. And if you look really closely at the exterior of this building, you will notice that the entire exterior of this building was actually built out of used railroad ties. Back in the early 70s, Napa had completely redone their entire railroad system, and they were sitting on all these old railroad ties. And Mr. Phelps went to the county and said, hey, what are you going to do with those? And they said, we're going to destroy them. And he said, I'll take them all. And he implemented them into the design of this building. Now, as we're standing here, or maybe while you're walking around waiting for this tour, you may have heard this squawking sound that comes out of nowhere. And that is actually a recording of a hawk. And it goes off every 8 minutes. And what that does is it prevents the woodpeckers from eating my beautiful, tasty building. Now, I can only surmise that used railroad ties must be a rare delicacy for woodpeckers, because they would just trash my building. But the moment that kicks in, it scares them away and saves my beautiful building. Now, the fun part of that little story I just shared with you is this. The original company that hired Mr. Joseph Phelps to start this winery back in 1972 was the Pillsbury Corporation. Literally, somebody at Pillsbury was just sitting around and they said, hey, what the heck? We got some yeast. Let's get some grape juice, make some wine. And they were the ones who started this winery. However, the really funny part of that story is that little adventure only lasted for 2 years. Because apparently, the president of Pillsbury wasn't aware they owned a winery.
Oh.
$6 million to build this winery, and the president of the company had no idea. And literally, when he found out, he was like, wait, what? We own a winery? How did that happen? That's not who we are. That's not what we do. That's not our brand, right? We're baked goods. We're cookies. We're cakes. We're the Pillsbury Doughboy. You poke him in the belly, he giggles, right? Hee. He said, look, get rid of it. I don't want it. Sell it. And so they did. And they sold it to another famous gentleman here in this valley, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Bill Yeager of the Yeager Group, a co-op, a gentle farmers and viticulturalists who literally were part of making Napa what it is today. They took this property over and called it Rutherford Hill. Rutherford is the name of the AVA, or American Viticultural Area, where we're located here in this valley. This valley is broken up into 16 AVAs, or sub-districts, and each sub-district was created by the county because literally you can take the same grapes, plant them over there, plant them over here, and they're going to be different based on what is called terroir, or environment. So, where you're standing right now is Rutherford, and we are the heat zone. We are heaven for those big, big reds. Cab Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. However, Mr. Yeager made an interesting choice. He decided on this property that we were going to focus on the Merlot grape. A grape that doesn't like heat in a heat zone. But the reason he did that is back in 1976 when they took this property over, nobody in this valley was growing Merlot. Everybody was focused on the valley floor. They tried to grow Merlot, it was too hot, and it died, and they just kind of gave up on that varietal. He was the first one to come in and say, you know what, let's get off the valley floor. Let's start exploring the hills and sides of this beautiful valley. So right now you are standing on the Vaca mountain range. You're 450 feet where you stand. There's the ridge line right there. He went straight down this ridge line to its highest point. It's called Atlas Peak. 1,500 feet off the valley floor. Planted those vines in an old dormant volcano, and it was heaven for that grape. Then Mr. Yeager decided they were going to produce 100,000 cases of wine here on this property. But they were going to go for the target market for their product. It was the low-end tier of the market. So they were going to shoot for volume over quality. In fact, we are literally talking the everyday table wines and the jug wines of that period of time. 70s, 80s, into the early 90s. In fact, just for fun, in 1979, you could get a gallon jug of Rutherford Hill Merlot for 79 cents. Good times. Yeah, right? Volume over quality, not the best product. However, something interesting happened here in Napa in the early 90s. A lot of people started visiting Napa. And all of a sudden, they started tasting some really good wines. And all of a sudden, the whole market shifted. And now everybody wanted the good wines. And so all of a sudden, they were sitting on over 100,000 cases of wine that they couldn't sell because nobody wanted it. And they literally just said, that's it, we're getting out of the business. And they walked away. They literally just abandoned it, the building. That's where we step back in time ever so slightly to 1956 when a young man by the name of Tony Terlato with his father moved from Brooklyn, New York to Chicago to start a liquor store called Leading Liquor Mart. But they were going to be different. They were going to start selling European wines to the Chicago public. Nobody else was doing that. They were the first to start shipping wines from Italy and France into Chicago and selling them to the Chicago public, and they became incredibly successful. So successful that they then started a distribution company called Pacific Wine and Spirits, distributing European wines all throughout the United States. And they became incredibly successful. However, Tony always dreamed of owning his own winery and making his own beautiful blends. And when this property came on the market in 1996, here was his golden opportunity, and he bought it. First thing he did was start over from scratch. and he took the 100,000 cases of wine that were left here on this property, and he dumped them out. Literally just dumped them all out because they were not good enough. You would, if you should have got the memo, you would have.
I would have taken a few for
I get that a lot of my tours. By now, if everybody just grabbed a case, life would have been good.